Right, so I've got the wheel covers made, and you can see how much better that looks than the alternative, which, well, here, I'll show you. Let me take them off, and boom. This is how the wheel would have looked, just that flat. Yeah, you can't really, there's not the best light here at night. There we go. So that, if we just painted that in the accent color, red or white or yellow, versus the caps, the wheel covers that I've made, if I can get that on there without dropping it. I tell you what, turn the cameras on and all thumbs. So now there's that, which is just a much better look, especially with the wheel fairings, you know, the what do you want to call them? Wheel pants. Anyway, so now we have the wheel covers, the actual wheel covers, and it's a Stearman style wheel cover. They use that on the P40. They used it on the T6 Texan. That style of solid wheel cover like that. Anyway, it looks good on this airplane. So we finish those up just like we do everything else. And you want to put a bunch of spackle on there. Wipe some spackle on there, sand it off a couple, 2 or 3 times. Get rid of all that wood grain, and then we'll just paint it once with the sand and seal, and sand that off with a 400 grit sandpaper. Spray it with a primer, and then spray it with that accent color, whatever that final color is going to be. As I say, I'm still working that out, but I'm thinking they'll probably be white, since that's the accent color they have on the aircraft that I'm modeling. Anyway, I thought I'd show you that. And the way we make these wheel covers is pretty basic. So I use the 1/32nd, is it? Or is it the 1/64th? Maybe it's the 1/64th. Yeah. Birch ply 1/64th. And what you want to do is determine the size of the circle. I have a circle template. You can use a compass if you have that. So on here it's the 1 1/8. Yeah, 1 1/8 diameter. So it's this one here. Fits in there perfectly. So you just draw that circle onto your birch ply material. And then I just use scissors to cut it out. And you can cut out, you can use scissors on this stuff. You can't cut it like paper. In other words, you can do part of the arc, maybe just a small section of the arc, and then you have to continue off in a straight line and kind of keep coming at it and coming at it, going around. If you try to cut it all at once, you're going to split the wood with the scissors. It's not like I said, with paper, which will fold and bend under as you're going around the circle. This stuff is a little less forgiving than that. So you have to just cut small pieces, small sections of your circle, and then cut off to a straight line to allow that pressure to be alleviated, and then come back into the circle, and so on. So once that's cut out of this material, you trace that onto your whatever thickness you want your wheel covers to be. I just used 16th material. They don't need to be thick. So 1/16th material, you glue it on there, cross band it. So I've got the grain on the balsa this way, and the grain on the birch ply going the opposite direction, sideways to that. And the reason for that is to keep them flat, and then and to give it extra strength. And then you just sand the contours. You just sand around the edges. Profile this like a drum head, like a dome shape. And I just use the 400 grit and just work it around. Until you have that nice clean shape. And it's just sanded like that. You don't have to apply pressure. You don't want to apply pressure to it. Right? It's just the weight of the paper itself. Maybe just a finger weight on top of it. Not pressing down, but just the weight of your fingers. and that's all you need to do, and you get a nice profile, right? And when it's on the wheel, if there's any, obviously you're not going to get it perfect, but most of the sins of your effort are hidden by the fact that it's now embedded in the wheel, and it's just part of the overall imagery that you're taking in with your eyes all at once when it's on the airplane. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to make it consistent as best you can. Right? So you see how that just piece of cake. So the wheel covers are done. You can see how they look on the model. What else? I'm going to be laying up the horizontal stabilizer and elevator at this point. Just going to be one piece. I'll simulate the control surface lines, probably with trim tape. So I'm debating whether to lay this up and infill it. I've been having some issues with the cross-banded lamination. What I did for the vertical surface, it has a tiny warp, a bit of a warp to it, and I don't know how that's happening. It must be unequal grain on the two layers of 1/16 material. There must have been one that was a stiffer grain than the other. Typically, if everything's equal, they're the same thickness, it's the same kind of wood, they're just cross-banded, should prevent warp. It should keep everything flat. But for some reason, I've got just a slight deflection in the vertical fin, and I don't like that, and I don't want to see that with the horizontal stabilizer. So if I lay it up and infill it and sand it flush, it just won't be able to warp, unless I build a warp into it, and that's shouldn't happen. So I'm leaning towards the extra duty, the extra work of doing the layup and then infilling each of these openings with balsa, and then sanding it flush with filler and all that. So that's what I'm going to do. I just can't afford to have any kind of warp. Now, to take the warp out of the vertical fin, I have an idea that I might just slice it horizontally, not all the way through the tail, but halfway through the tail, and then notch it to a 1/16 using my jeweler's file, and then straighten it up with my hand while I insert a 1/16 square strip into that gap I created. And then we'll take a look and see, actually it would be less than a 1/16 gap, because I want the 1/16 material to be apply enough pressure to stand the tail, to take out that warp. So I'm not even sure how that'll work, or if it'll work, or any of that. But if that warp persists, now I've been treating it with using the sand and seal on the opposite side of the rudder, and then letting that cure and dry, and then sanding on it to try and get, if the grain on the side that's causing the warp is stiffer or too heavy, if I sand it down until it's thinner than the other side, it might alleviate the strain that's causing the warp. This is all guesswork on my part. I can't figure out why it's there in the first place, so I'm not sure how to remedy it, not knowing what's causing it. But well, we'll figure out something. We'll get the tail straightened out. But again, to prevent a similar situation, now that I'm having that happen, I'm going to probably lay up the horizontal tail just to avoid it altogether, avoid the problem. What else? I haven't started on the pilot yet. That's coming up too. So a couple of things to take care of over the next couple of days. We're still probably 2 weeks away from finishing this thing up, and then the rigging is going to be its own set of issues. On the rigging on this airplane, one of the things I've learned is that there's a whole lot of, I don't know what you call it, wackiness with this rigging. So the wires coming from the upper, or the underside of the upper wing cross. They come to a focal point and then cross with each other. So from the front post, is rigged to the rear top of the rear cabane strut, and the rear wing strut post is rigged to the forward strut, the top of the forward strut. And in order for it to make it to that point, you have to slice and notch the landing gear leg. They actually pass through the rear of the landing gear main leg in order to reach this area here, just above the forward underpost, landing gear under support. So, and then from the front position to the rear cabane, they actually you have to notch the leading edge of the wing in order for those wires to get to that location. So this has to be notched and this has to be notched if I'm to do that accurate to the model, to the prototype, which I want to do. I sure as heck don't want to fake that, but cutting through this aluminum and then knowing exactly where to cut it, and then cutting it in such a way. In other words, I don't have a blade that's that wide, so it would be two cuts, and then I have to figure out a way to then remove that piece without being able to cut it this way. So you see, I've got a situation here, and I saw it coming. I knew using these aluminum posts I was going to be confronted with that, but I just set it aside, the idea of how to solve that, with my main focus being on getting the gear assembled in the first place, with all the issues that were contingent on this alignment, on this construction. So notching the leading edge is no problem, but not notching the trailing edge of this main gear support, that's going to be something funny. And then, that's not even, well, I guess that's the thrust of the rigging problem. That's the main issue I'm going to have, is notching this. If I decide to do it, if I relocate the attachment point to somewhere, behind that actual location, and if I can't, because you can't see it, you can't get here from here without going through this. So the other option I have is to drill holes through this instead of notching it. I can paint a notch, I can take just a black stripe here but have two holes drilled through parallel to each other right here, and simulate a notch that way. That might be a better solution than trying to cut that out. If I use a blade that is wide enough, the vibration and the friction of cutting that is going to damage this. And if I cut them with my razor saw, then I don't have any way to cut it longitudinally to remove that section. So I think I'll have to drill through. And then, so now knowing exactly where to do that, so that this line isn't, the rigging line isn't deflected one way or the other. And then too, what's going to happen is it's going to be rough on the inside of this aluminum where that's been drilled through, which could cut the wires. So I'll have to figure out then what I'm going to use for rigging. I might have to use actual metal wire, at least for these front lines. And if I'd have to use it throughout, then whatever I'm going to do here, I'd have to use throughout the airplane. So, still some decisions to be made. What else can I talk about at this point? Well, I wanted to show you how the wheel covers are fabricated. That is the purpose of our videos. My videos here is to try and show people how to do different things, at least in one way of doing them, and what it does to the aircraft, how small details like that can make a huge difference in the way that your model presents, the way your project comes out the other side of all your work. Little things make a huge difference. So, at any rate, still, let's get this lined up. I was right about like that. Yeah. Right, I lost my wing strut. Here it is. My temporary template strut. So anyway, it's a neat little airplane. It's a funny looking little feller, especially with that wacky rigging situation. It is what it is, and I'll do the best I can with it. Rest assured. And everybody thanks for watching, and have a good night.